What's the best beginner film camera? While there's no simple answer to that question, you can be sure that the Canon AE-1 will rank among the top 3 answers. I personally never really understood the fuss around this Canon AE-1 because for me it's a good camera but it has nothing special. So I've been wondering if there's not a better alternative within the same price range that could deliver equal or even better quality than the Canon can do. And luckily for you, I found one. It's called the Contax 139Q or Quartz. So in this video, I'm going to share with you a few reasons why I believe this Contax is the best camera you could buy if you want to start film photography. And at the end, I'll give you a tip to get this one for really cheap. There are many good camera systems, but I believe the Contax SLRs are some of the most underrated cameras that we can still find today. Sadly, Contax didn't make it through the digital transition, and for most of us and the younger generation, the Contax name doesn't ring any bell. When I came to film photography, it took me a few months to hear about Contax cameras. At first, it was of course the Contax T2 that came to my ears, but later on I discovered that there were some hidden gems among the Contax cameras. Just to give you a bit of history about this brand, the first Contax was made in 1932 by Carl Zeiss. At the time, they were trying to build a camera that could compete against Leicas. It's just to give you an idea of the quality that we are talking about here. Later on, the Contax brand disappeared and was acquired in 1983, if I'm correct, by Kyocera and Yashica, the Japanese camera maker. So what they did at the time is they made a partnership with Carl Zeiss. So they acquired the name Contax. Yashica Kyocera would handle the manufacturing of the bodies, while Carl Zeiss will still provide the lenses. That's why all the Contax cameras, can be their point and shoot, but they are SLRs as well, or the rangefinder like the G1 and G2, all come with amazing lenses from Carl Zeiss. And in my opinion, that's what makes those cameras special, because at the end of the day, the body is just a dark chamber that is here to hold your film and your lens. It doesn't affect the image quality, but the lens does a lot in that. That's why I think these cameras are some of the best that one can get, because they are still undervalued and you can get those Carl Zeiss lenses for really cheap. Okay, now let's talk about this Contax and see what it's made of. So first of all, it's a body made of metal. It's really sturdy and feel really solid. The design was made by Porsche actually. They did a few designs for Contax cameras, like the Contax T or the Contax RTS. Then this one is an aperture priority camera, but you can also shoot in manual focus. There is exposure compensation here. You have the shutter release on the top, your ISO selector here. On the top you have of course the hot shoe mount for the flash, film advance here. What's a bit strange about this camera is the exposure preview. Usually when you have press on the shutter release, you get a meter reading inside the viewfinder. But with this one, you have to press on this button at the front, which is a bit weird at first, but then you kind of get used to it. Some don't like it. It is not, for me, it's not a deal breaker. It's just a different habit. Then you have your depth of field preview button here. And for the exterior, then yeah, at the bottom, you can screw a motor as well. That is going to be a winding motor. It's going to be winding the film here. And I think that's about it. Oh yes, and the last thing, you have your, how you call that? The self-timer. I'm losing my words. The shutter speed goes from 1 second to 1,000 of a second, and you also have the bulb mode. And when you set it up on auto, basically it's in aperture priority, so you're going to set up your shutter speed and the camera will decide the speed for you. The 139Q has an electronically controlled quartz shutter, meaning that the shutter speed are not settled on fixed shutter speed like 1000, 1500, 1250. Instead, the shutter speed will be adjusted to match perfectly the exposure that is required. While it may not be essential when you're shooting C41 color film or even black and white, I can assure that for slide film this is a huge plus, and that at the time no other camera has such feature. Most of the time you will find this Contax with a standard kit lens, which is a 50mm that opens at f1.7. There's also the 1.4 version. It is way more expensive, and in my opinion this kit lens does a perfect job. I never even consider the faster version because I don't need extra speed and I'm perfectly happy with the result it delivers. I'm not sure if you can tell here, but this Contax is very compact and lightweight. This one fits perfectly in one hand, and yeah, with this kit lens, you can carry it everywhere without being a burden. What I also really like about this camera is the viewfinder. It has a magnification of 0.86, which is pretty big and bright. Inside the viewfinder you have LEDs that will indicate the shutter speed, and at the top you also have a small window to tell you about which aperture you are. It maxed out at f2 for what I could tell, even though this lens is a 1.7 aperture, so when you are shooting at f1.7 it will read at f2 inside the viewfinder, so just get used to it and work around that. But apart from that, it's a pretty good viewfinder, and it has everything you need without being too cluttered and packed with useless information. Thanks to a strong connection with Carl Zeiss, Contax cameras benefit of an amazing lineup of in total 52 lenses made by Carl Zeiss, and they all benefit of the famous T-star coating that we all love on Zeiss lenses. In my case, I have the 50mm. I also have an 85 f1.4, which is amazing. It's a bit heavy and bulky because there's a lot of glass in that lens, but it was really cheap for what it is. And when you compare the other versions, maybe from Canon, Nikon, or any other brands, this one is a real bargain, and it just delivers amazing results with a sweet and creamy bokeh like we all love. Then I also have the 135 f2.8, which is also amazing telephoto lens. It's maybe not the best because I think there is an f2 version that costs like 10 times the price of this one, but I don't really need the extra stop here and the extra glass inside. This one is already big enough, but I don't use it often, but when I do, I'm always pleased with the result. And I got it for like 100 euros, so I could not let this pass. The lens mount of these lenses is called the CY mount. The CY stands for Contax Yashica. Because these cameras were made by Yashica, they also developed their lens lineup, which means that you have a lot of lenses that have been made by Yashica that are almost as good as the Zeiss version, and you have a really large choice. I think in total you have, let me check, 380 lenses in total that have been made for this specific camera system. So this gives you plenty of choices and lens options that you can choose from. I also have the 1.4 from the 50mm 1.4 from Yashica, which is nice, but I honestly prefer for the same price you can get the Zeiss version that is f1.7, and this is honestly way better. But if you end up with one of the Yashica version, they are definitely good alternatives as well to the Zeiss, and they cost even cheaper than the Zeiss. So don't outlook these ones, because you definitely have good options hidden in there as well. To my knowledge, the biggest downside of these Contax is the fake leisure that will eventually fall apart. Most of the time you will find really cheap bodies on eBay, for example, just because they look very torn or used, just because of the leisureette that has been falling apart. It doesn't mean the camera is not operating good, it's just the exterior aspect that looks really bad, and most of people will assume that the camera is not working properly anymore, so they're just going to sell it for close to nothing. You can find them for 30, 40 or 50 euro, and you can even buy a kit, I'll put a link below, where you can buy a kit and and replace it yourself. It's not as complicated as it seems. I've never done it myself, but I'm quite sure I could do it. Luckily I don't have to do it on my copy, but for now it's in perfect condition, but maybe one day I will have to replace it. But anyway, that was my tip for you to get cheap Contax, and then you just have to find a good copy of the lens, because at the end that's what matters. Lens in good condition and a working camera. You don't really mind about the exterior aspect. For me, as long as it works, I'm happy with that. I hope this quick introduction to the Contax 139 made you discover an amazing camera lineup. I honestly believe these cameras and the Contax brand, at least for the SLRs, are still very underrated and rank among some of the best film SLR that were ever made. Whether you are a beginner film photographer or already advanced, I really believe the Contax cameras can either be the perfect way to enter the world of film photography, or step up your game and access the wonderful world of Carl Zeiss lenses. Anyway, that's all from me, guys, for today. I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon in the next episode. Bye, guys.